Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Winter weather and temperatures have definitely arrived in Oklahoma this week. We begin today with our OSU Extension equine specialist talking about the best ways to care for your horses when it's this cold outside.
Yeah, so right now our horses are pretty adapted for winter weather. So essentially when our days get shorter, there's some hormonal changes that go through their body that signal, hey, it's time to develop a winter coat. So horses that have been housed outside with normal daylight should be pretty well prepared already for winter.
There are some energy requirements though that change. Talk about that.
Oh, absolutely. So keeping their body temperature up during the winter does cost a little bit more extra energy for them. So normally for those colder days, we recommend that horses have more forage or more hay available to them, because when they're digesting that, it actually also produces extra heat. So not only do they get more calories by eating more, but that very act of eating and digesting helps keep them warm.
What about water needs? You may think, oh, the ground's covered with snow, I'm good for a few days. That's not necessarily the case.
No. So snow does not count as water. They need liquid water. And so one of the things people don't think about all the time is even cold water can hurt their teeth if they have bad teeth, just like if you had bad teeth. So older horses may actually drink a little less in the winter. So if there's a way to provide warmer water or even just room temperature water by using water heaters, that can go a long way to keeping their intake up and also preventing any other digestive issues that may come along with dehydration. If you're going to use a water heater to keep buckets flowing or outdoor tanks, they have to be very well protected and guarded from the horse itself. The second part of that is you have to understand what the wattage of your heater is and choose the right cord if you're using that route or having properly grounded outlets.
So what's the main question you get this time of year from horse owners and your peers in the equine community? What do you hear?
The question we always get is whether horses need a blanket or not. So as people tend to think about horses more as companion animals, sometimes we know they are an agricultural species, but we think about them a little bit differently, and their comfort's important. So people will always say, does a horse need a blanket right now? Well, if we talked about they're already adapted, probably not, because they're well prepared for that. Very old animals that might be a little bit thinner or have a harder time may benefit from a blanket. But what we don't want people to do is just put a blanket on a horse and forget about it. For one, you're not monitoring their body weight under the blanket. They could have rubbing, sores, etc. And in Oklahoma, we know our weather changes so fast. So if we put a blanket on a horse today where they might appreciate it, and we leave it on and it warms back up to 50 or 60 degrees, that horse is going to be sweating under that blanket, and that can actually lead to chilling. So if you're going to blanket them, you have to stay on top of it.
Great. Well, great advice, Kris. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Stay warm.
You too.
Hi, Wes Lee with the Mesonet weather report. This past week brought Oklahoma a couple of record-breaking snowstorms. On Sunday and again on Tuesday, snow fell on a large portion of the state. This map from the National Weather Service highlights the areas of snowfall, generally ranging from an inch to almost a foot of snow for the week. The 5-day rainfall map from Wednesday morning shows a combination of rainfall and a partial melting of the snow that fell. Our rain gauges are not heated, therefore we must wait until natural melt occurs to capture the moisture value of snow. Expect snowmelt to continue, especially in the northwest, until warmer weather later in the weekend. Soil moisture at the 4-inch level is pretty good in all locations except for the 2 persistent drought areas of the Panhandle and Southwest. This fractional water index map from the 16th is mostly green, with numbers in the 0.9 to 1 range. 1 is the wettest the sensors can measure. Expect the conditions to get a little better in the northwest and Panhandle areas as the snowmelt moves into the soil profile. As scarce as rainfall has been at times this fall, we are still in better shape than we were the last 2 years on the same date at 4 inches. Here is a quick glance at the 2019 map. Now here's Gary giving us some future forecast information.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, if we keep getting this snow, we're actually going to make a dent in this drought. Unfortunately, we keep getting the snow where the drought's not at its worst. But we have had some improvements. Let's take a look. Well, the latest drought monitor map, pretty much the same that we've seen over the last few weeks, with that moderate to severe to extreme drought across southwestern Oklahoma, the same out for the western panhandle, and then some moderate drought building across the south central and the southeast Oklahoma. But we did have a little bit of reduction of that moderate drought up in McCurtain County in the far southeast, and then a little bit of a reduction of the abnormally dry conditions, that yellow color on the map, up into east central Oklahoma. So we have had a few improvements. We just need that snow to hit those parts of the northwest and the southwest where that drought's really at its worst. Speaking of snow, this is our seasonal snowfall totals for the country thus far. You can see parts of northwest Oklahoma have had more than 2 feet of snow in some cases. And the rest of the state, everybody's seen a little bit of snow, pretty much, except a little bit more up into the northern half of the state. Again, far southwest Oklahoma, still missing out on that white stuff, but it's a long way to go before winter's over. After all that excitement, I'm afraid we're going to have a little bit more boring outlook for the rest of the year. As we get into the last week of the year, we do see increased odds for above normal temperatures from the Climate Prediction Center, and then we see increased odds for below normal precipitation across much of the central part of the United States, including for Oklahoma in both temperature and precipitation. Now, when we look at the drought outlook for Oklahoma, this is going through the end of March. We don't see any improvements in store for Oklahoma. We do see persistence or possible development of drought likely across those areas where those abnormally dry conditions already are. That's not necessarily set in stone. We'll just have to see if we get any more of these extreme events that are interjecting into this overall La Nina pattern. So we are seeing improvements. They're small, but they are there. We just need to hit the right part of the state to get a little bit more of those improvements into the southwest and northwest, and also down in south central Oklahoma. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Well, we brought the winter to the winter crops, and Josh, here we are in a canola crop, also a winter crop. How are things looking as far as canola goes?
Well, Dave, it actually looks pretty good on the few acres that we have in the state. They look really good. I wish you could see this one, but it's a great situation to be in. The moisture is exactly what we needed. Even though we've been fairly cold, we've had this canola that some of it is just coming up in some areas of the field. Some of it's really up, and so having that nice blanket of snow with these cold days is always a good thing. And just having the precipitation this time of the year is really good, and we can't really ask for more.
It is cold, and in the past, canola may not have been the hardiest in the colder weather, but the snow actually helps out with that, with the colder conditions. Yeah,
when we pair moisture with the cold, we're typically okay. Canola is meant to stand conditions like this. It's just all too often that first month or two of winter, when we get these really cold days, we're also dry. We don't get that precipitation, that snow, typically until January and February, when we've gone through a couple of these spells already. So because we have the moisture and because we have now the cold following it, we got a snowpack here today, but we have good soil moisture on some of this areas where the canola is, and also where some of the wheat is. We look fairly good even with these relatively cold temperatures. We could be worse, but we're pretty chilly right now, but it could be a lot worse.
Moving forward, is there anything producers need to be thinking about when it comes to canola making it all the way to May and June?
Well, we're at a standstill now. I'd prefer not to. If you have canola in the field, your fertility in the fall should have been out. Any sort of herbicide should have already been out. We're at the hurry up and wait scenario. We are getting some indication of putting out some nitrogen during these freezing conditions when canola is not really growing a whole lot is positive. We have a couple years data on that, but it's basically stating that, you know, canola never goes into a true dormancy like wheat does. It continues to grow. When we get a good 70, 80 degree day, it'll grow a little bit at a time. And so if we're running out of nitrogen during that part of the time, we could be limiting some production. The other thing is when we go out for that green up application, putting on those leaves that we might have lost during the winter is really critical. And if we're very deficient on nitrogen, we might not be able to put those leaves on. So there is some indication that coming in late December, January, putting on a little nitrogen is okay. But for the most part, our growers need to be looking forward to that green up application because we have a couple of big major things. One, we talked about the nitrogen needs to go out. If you have your enriched strips, go and take a look at those. If you don't, put the remainder of the nitrogen you typically would put on. And we run out of our window for herbicide applications, particularly if you're in a Roundup Ready system, very, very early in the spring. Basically, once that plant starts bolting, Roundup or glyphosate for all generalities is off the table. And so if we got some weeds pop up with these wet conditions, as things warm up, if we stay wet, we need to make sure to get out there and control some of those weeds, because remember, we brought canola to the table as a weed control measure in some of our wheat fields. So if we do have some of those grasses start popping up real early in the spring, maybe even some of those wild mustards, a henbit crop, something along those lines, it's one to take an eye out for.
One thing I want to go back to what you said earlier about the damage that may occur to the leaves. Canola really is a hardy plant when it comes to potential damages to that. There is a regrowth period.
Yeah, and if we lose most, if not all of the leaves during this part of the time, or this part of the year, we're gonna be okay. We've seen complete burn back of leaves and complete recycle. Now, we don't typically have the growth potential if we lose everything, but we're gonna lose some leaves during the winter, and that's okay because we're gonna grow back. The thing you want to survive is that root stem system. If that root and stem system is still intact, you're in a good situation. We typically aim to get 4 to 6 true leaves. That means that system, that mesocotyl system, has fully developed, and it's gotten enough sugars and nutrients and resources in that system that it can withstand these kind of conditions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Josh Lofton, Cropping Systems Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Well, there's a mystery that happens every year that we certainly have trouble understanding, and that's this business of how Santa Claus and his reindeer make that trip all around the world to take care of good little boys and girls each Christmas Eve. Reindeer have been domesticated by man, and that means that man has used reindeer to pull sleighs and other equipment for over 5,000 years. And heck, we know Santa's no spring chicken himself. And so I think we need to understand that with them being around together for a long time, they're going to have no trouble finding their way around the world and finding your house on Christmas Eve. So don't worry about them getting lost. Some people worried about how cold it is on these winter nights when Santa and the reindeer are flying around. Reindeer have a specialized coat. They actually have kind of 2 different layers. The outer layer is kind of bristly and longer hairs, and an inner layer of very, very fine hairs or fur. Those 2 layers then actually serve as insulation. And so those reindeer that are used to this kind of cold and snowy weather are sure not going to have any trouble getting too cold as they fly around the world going to different parts that are both warm and cold at night. We know that reindeer are ruminants. They're just like cattle in the fact that a ruminant has 4 compartments to their stomach. One of them is a very large area called the rumen, and then the other 3 compartments. That allows these reindeer to take on a big meal. And Santa's pretty sharp. He understands that if these reindeer eat a lot of forage type material, roughage, what they're using is perhaps hay moss that they dig out of the ground, he knows that these forages digest more slowly than something like grain. And so it'll stay with them as they make the long trip. Or like your grandma or your mother might used to say, when you had a good breakfast, it'll stick to their ribs. Now, this business about how do reindeer fly, hey, that's a tough one. And I've looked into this the best I could. I know that these reindeer, the one that Santa have, their antlers are about 4 feet in length on adult reindeer. That's a total of 8 feet of antler span on each reindeer. There's 8 reindeer, 9 if it's a foggy Christmas Eve, and so those reindeer in total have an antler span of 64 to 72 feet. Well, a small airplane like a Cessna that we might have out here at the airport, the wingspan on that's only about 36 feet. So we've got enough antler span on these 8 reindeer to do the job. And so if I was you, I think I would just go ahead and go to bed early this Christmas Eve and let Santa do his job. He's going to get there, he's safe, and we hope that you have a very Merry Christmas.
There's only about 2 more weeks left of 2020, so Derrell, when we're talking trade, where are we looking like for beef exports?
You know, if we look at the year-to-date data, which is through October, we run a couple months behind on getting the data, but beef exports so far this year are down about 5.3%. You know, we struggled a little bit. We had some serious disruptions in April and May, or May and June actually, and then we've recovered since then, but you know, we're struggling. Markets like Mexico are way off this year, partly as a result of their recession and aggravated by the pandemic. So, you know, so we've struggled a little bit, but held together pretty well on some of the markets.
So, in regards to the other protein markets, what's going on there?
You know, if you look at pork exports, we're up about 20% this year. That's driven almost entirely by China, who is still trying to make up for their protein deficit after, you know, losing so much swine production from African swine fever. And so we've seen tremendous growth in that market. Broiler exports are up about 4.2% so far this year. And again, a lot of that is actually due to China as well, who is, you know, China is importing proteins of all types. And so they're our number 2 broiler market, and they didn't import any broiler meat through October of last year. So, you know, so we see a lot of impact on all 3 of these markets really from China.
So, you know, that's one side of the market. Let's move to the other in regards to imports. What are we looking like for beef?
You know, we do import quite a bit of beef in the U.S. As a part of our complex product structure. Imports are up this year about 12%. You know, and again, that sort of reflects some of the disruptions related to the pandemic. We backed up a lot of cattle. They got heavy, they had extra fat on them, and we use imported lean in a lot of cases to support ground beef production when we have that excess fat. So now here at the end of the year, we're kind of coming back down to last year's levels, and we really expect that going into next year, we'll see the imports tail off and actually be down on a year-over-year basis.
So in going into 2021 and with the news of a vaccine out, is that, do you foresee that like any impact in regards to COVID and how that's going to impact these trade markets at all?
I think it will. You know, it is a global pandemic, and so as we get the pandemic under control, working our way through 2021, I think we'll see these trade markets stabilize a little bit. There certainly has been some significant impacts and disruptions in 2020. It'll take through, you know, certainly through the first half of the year, but I do expect to see things stabilize and look a little bit stronger as we get into the second half of 2021.
So, you know, finally, before we let you go, what about the live cattle markets? What do you expect that's going to happen there?
Well, as far as the trade picture, you know, in North America, we do import some cattle from both Canada and Mexico. We are getting more cattle from Mexico in 2020 for the first 10 months of the year. Imports from Canada are actually down a little bit. You know, it's more or less a normal flow, but again, the Mexican situation pretty seriously aggravated by the COVID situation. They're down on importing meat from us, but up on exporting cattle and beef to us.
All righty, thanks, Derrell. Dr. Derrell Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Anaplasmosis is caused by Anaplasma marginale. This is a bacteria that infects the red blood cells. Typical clinical signs are fever, anemia, You may get some icterus around the eyes, or if you look in the mouth, you might see that yellow color. These animals are usually weak, they don't want to eat, they may abort, and in worst case scenarios, they'll die. Typically, we see most of our cases in late summer, early fall, that time period. So when we get to the winter, we kind of have a lull as far as cases are concerned. And that's why Dr. Coetzee from Kansas State University recommends this is a good time to have that conversation with your veterinarian about talking about prevention and control. One of the things that Dr. Coetzee has recommended is doing a herd test to see what the prevalence of this disease is in your herd. When we do that, a lot of the times we find out that, maybe a third or a half of the herd is infected and the other half is not, or 2/3 is not. If you're using a vaccine, one of the advantages of going ahead and doing this herd test is there's probably not a reason to vaccinate those positive animals. We generally assume that when we have a persistently infected cow, that she typically will not get clinical signs of anaplasmosis in case something that compromises her immune system happens. Unless that happens, these typically will not have clinical signs. So the thought process is we could save some money by just vaccinating those negative animals and leaving those positive animals alone. There are also some other controlled measures that Dr. Coetzee recommends. If you'd like some information about these recommendations, if you'll go to sunup.okstate.edu.
Back in Scouts, we used to sing, when you're up, and when you're down, and when you're only halfway up, you're neither up or down. Well, Kim, that's kind of how the wheat market's been here lately.
That's exactly correct. You know, you go back last Friday, prices were up around 14, 15 cents. On Monday, they were down 14 or 15 cents. And there's just a lot going on in the market. Well, there's some things going on in the market. We're in the holiday time period. We're going to see days where there's more sellers than there's buyers. Prices are going to go down, and days there's more buyers than sellers. Now, what's been going on early this week was that Russia announced that they're going to put in an export tax of about 82 cents a bushel on their wheat on the January or February through June time period. We'll have to see what impact. I thought that'd have a relatively good impact on the prices. When you're going up, you're up. When you're going down, you're down.
What could that mean for not only the U.S. wheat market, but also other exporting countries?
Well, that can be increased export demand for our wheat. Right now, Russia's got about a 42-cent price advantage, 42-cent price advantage going into North Africa. Some countries, they've been moving their market into the Asian countries. It's going to give us a closer, not advantage, but it's going to pretty much equalize that transportation, and there's a possibility we can gain 30 to 40 cents out of that. If it's an 82-cent tax, that means their wheat is now going to cost 82 cents more. They've got a 42-cent advantage on us on transportation. You take that off, it leaves us 40 to spare.
That's for January, but how long will that last? I mean, it's going to be June, July before this wheat crop's harvested.
Well, it depends on what the Russian government decides on how much stocks they need, how much their population, the Russians, the people, their prices have been going up on their breads and on their flours. They don't like that. Putin doesn't like that, and they want more stocks and lower prices. We talk about what's going on here on prices. Russian prices fell dramatically when they announced that, and that is good for the Russian consumer. We talked about their ending stocks, their stocks to use ratio around 10%. Ours is in the 40s. They feel that they don't have enough wheat stocks. They need more stocks in reserve for food emergencies. Like right now, wheat stocks are tight. If they have a short crop next year, they could be in trouble for bread, flour, wheat, and for their exports. And I think they're trying to build stocks, and this is one way to do it.
Quality of crop obviously will play into that with the protein levels, because that's why many of the countries go to them. But what could that mean if they don't have the wheat crop quality in there?
Well, that's a good point, because normally they have around 78% of their wheat is milling quality wheat. In other words, 22% of it's feed wheat. This year they only had 72% of their wheat that was milling quality, or 28% of it was feed. And so that lowered their exportable wheat supplies and their supply of wheat for flour. If they get into that next year, short crop, poor quality, they could be in trouble.
Realistically, how much of this wheat crop here in Oklahoma will make it over to Russia's customers?
You know, policy comes, policy goes, but weather determines price. Right. If they have a short crop, we'll get a lot more wheat over there. If they have a large crop, another 3 billion bushel crop, then they may not need that tax after June, so there will be no export tax next year, and our market will be just like it is right now.
And of course, weather will always play a role in all of that too, and man, has it been cold out here. Thank you very much, Dr. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.